And joining us tonight is psychiatrist and Australian Financial Review columnist Tanveer Ahmed and senior reporter and host of The West Live, The West Australian, Ben O'Shea. Gents, it's so nice to see you. Let's kick off with the Australian tomorrow. Empty end for Saint of Left. Jacinda Ardern shocked her party and the country when she announced on Thursday that she was to step down as Prime Minister after 5.5 years, leaving New Zealand Labor to face a looming recession and a likely election defeat without her. Ben, look, I feel like you and I have spoken about Jacinda Ardern for years now. I remember you and I were working together when that Christchurch massacre took place, and she led with such warmth and humility. But again, I think we don't really understand just the absolute deficit that she had when it came to things like policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an interesting case of how a politician performs in their own domestic environment compared to how they're perceived outside of it. And Jacinda Ardern, like, you look at what she's achieved in the 5 years that she's had in office. There was the Christchurch massacre that, as you mentioned, she handled with such grace. There was a deadly volcanic eruption, and of course there was the COVID-19 pandemic. She found time in there to have a kid along the way. Yeah. So she certainly had a very busy period in office. People will talk about failings in policy. But like, I look at her decision to pull the pin now before an election that she very well could have lost, and you look at her reputation abroad in international diplomacy. She's so highly regarded. I think probably stepping aside now before what could be an embarrassing defeat might actually be a very smart move.
Yeah, I think you're bang on the money there, so that's for sure. Another story, a Natasha Bitter exclusive on the front of the Australian Tanveer: rules for schools lift student performance or lose funding. Schools will have to hit tough new academic and student wellbeing targets to pocket federal funding worth $26 billion a year, after an alarming new report found that 90,000 Australian kids are flunking baseline literacy and numeracy tests. The irony of the fact that I just flunked reading that entire paragraph just goes to show. But Tanveer, this just goes to show that the teachers and parents have been saying this for what feels like years now, that there is such a lack of talent in the education system. But do you think that threatening to pull funding will have any impact at all?
Look, I'm not sure yet. They're playing the sort of carrots and sticks game. In part, it's them trying to expose a previous deal that the former government made with the states and saying, well, this hasn't worked. So it's partly just kind of trying to show that off and playing a bit of politics. Yeah, I mean, I think so many of the issues are so ingrained in the systemic things within schools. These type of incentives may help, because one of the big problems in public schools particularly is often they can't make their own decisions. Teachers can't move on merit. You know, it's hard for them to be promoted. All of these sort of things. And perhaps this will help that, especially if they can really tie the focus to academic achievement, because that's another big issue at schools where they're having to deal with so many different things, everything from, you know, from culture wars to well-being, all of these sort of issues, and just bring back the focus and go, hang on, it needs to be about numbers, words, literacy, these kind of things. So look, there may be something in this, but there's so many, you know, problems, you know, within our system. Anything it does will be relatively minor, I suspect.
Yeah, if only we were taught where to put a comma as opposed to how to talk about, you know, feelings and climate change at this point in time, because I think you're right, get back to basics and we might see a quick turnaround, that's for sure.